Good morning, or I'm sorry, good afternoon, Vito, on the beautiful beaches of, where are you at today, Waikiki?
I only wish.
Yeah, all right. So we have a couple people on. Rick and Robert were here just a little bit before 1 o'clock, so I asked them just to give us a couple minutes, as I know that we had a couple snafus as far as dates, times, subjects, and such. So we'll give them a couple minutes, and then I see Brandon on, proudly wearing his punch list stuff. So I'll give him a 30-second commercial as well once we have everybody ready to roll. So let's give it another 60 seconds to 2 minutes and see where we go.
Perfect. Hello again, friends, and you are our friends. Welcome to another exciting edition of Family Affair. I'm your always willing and sometimes functional home inspector, Vito, and today, steering this boat through troubled waters to a safe harbor is a man who needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. It's Even Steven, the inspection deacon, the captain of the HMS Rock Solid, admiral of the fleet, and a home inspection savant. We know him as El Jefe and Mon Capitan. He's El Guapo to you. He's your friend and mine. I give you the great Stephen J. Baum.
Vito, I'm always so happy to hear your introductions because I know you put as much effort into that as you do home inspection. So everybody on here knows what they're getting when it comes to working with Rock Solid, based off of the time, effort, and energy. If only you could see me, you would see that I'm blushing. But I didn't shave today, and my hair is a little long, so I'm going incognito today in the background. So, but thank you everybody for joining us. We do really appreciate the fact that you've been joining us over the last 4 or 5 weeks as we go through a home inspection. Last week we had the pleasure of working closely with Florida Best Quote and Lindsay and her team to be able to deliver you some information on 4-point and wind inspections. Just remember that if you miss any of these, they are on our YouTube channel that you can always go back and review later, or you can always feel free just to give us a call. If you have any questions directly for Vito, shoot us an email, and we're always happy to help. So I always enjoy seeing so many familiar names and faces on the screen. Thank you so much for that. I did give a shout out a couple of seconds ago to our main man, Brandon, with Punch List. If you haven't had the pleasure of working with Punch List is one of the few partnerships that we like to make sure that we keep up to date with. Brandon and his team take your inspection report on the buyer side. They're able to go through it and offer some guidance as far as what those fixes and updates and other things may be, and then work with local general contractors, professionals in their industry to be able to help you and your client guide through that process. So I'll ask Brandon to put his contact information on the chat room. Please do reach out to Brandon. Great partner, great person, knows a lot of people. And one of the reasons that we like working with Brandon so much is not just his knowledge, but the fact that we cover 7 counties and Brandon has connections in all of those 7 counties plus. I noted that he goes up to Orlando, all the way down to Fort Myers and Naples and other areas of West Coast Florida that we don't even cover. So having a partner like that is really important because, again, it's all about adding value. And can't thank Brandon enough. He was able to help one of our buyers recently who had a sewer issue. We've talked about that cast iron sewer, and saved, I want to say her quote was $7,700. And through Brandon and his partnerships, I want to say it came down to like $5,200 or something in that effect. So saved the client about $2,000 just by having the right connections throughout the market. Client couldn't be happier. She just recently thanked us for the time, energy, and effort, and wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out to Brandon and what he's doing. So thank you so much, Brandon. Look forward, and we'll start doing some other joint meetings as well, whether it's with Brandon with Punch List like we did with Lindsay and Florida Best Quote. We have a good relationship with Jake Hullhouse at Hull House Insurance as well. Utility Helpers with Jonathan and Elijah are really great partners of ours. So just more that we can bring a partnership amongst us, the easier it makes our jobs. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for. So Vito, I will turn it back over to you. I see Deanna's on, and she'll lead us as always with our questions. So if you have any questions that come up during, please throw them up in the chat. We're always able to help and make sure that we're able to answer as many of those as we can. So Vito, the ship is yours.
Thank you, sir, and thanks everybody for joining. So today our topic is roofs and insulation as we continue, digging into inspecting your home inspection. And one of the biggest concerns I've across the board for all the clients that we work for, home buyers are usually, well, how's the roof? How's the roof? How's the roof? It's one of the biggest and most obvious things. It's, it can be one of the scariest things to have to report on. It's also, a plug and play item. It's meant to be removed and replaced, but because of expenses, because of the insurance requirements and everything else, it's something we have to pay a lot of attention to. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to start looking at what Florida State and the InterNACHI Standards of Practice have to say about it. So, of course, we want engagement. It's a little informal today. If you have any questions, put them right in the chat. Deanna will interrupt, and we'll address them. So this is taken right from the State of Florida Standards of Practice. And this is what they talk about, what we're to be inspecting as part of a home inspection. Roof covering systems and components, materials, flashing, skylights, chimneys, and penetrations, drainage systems, ventilation, insulation, and we will inspect all of the visible and readily accessible covering systems and components. We're not required to inspect anything that's not readily accessible, antennas, other installed accessories, interiors or flues or chimneys which are not readily accessible. And here's an interesting one. The inspector is not required to walk on the roof surface if, in his opinion, the following conditions exist.
Hey, Vito.
Yes, sir.
Can you do the all-around mute? And then we can unmute if we do have questions. Thank you, sir.
All right. I'm like a train. I'm hard to get back on track. Forgive me. So, according to the state, we're not actually required to walk on any roof surface if, in the inspector's opinion, the slope is excessive, and that's going to vary from person to person. There might not be safe access to the roof, as in the case with two stories or more. Climatic conditions like rain, that's our big one here. But I have my own feelings about that because it's one of the few times we can actually see a roof leak. Maybe the roof's got some damage, or walking on it might cause damage, or it would be a danger to the homeowner or other representatives involved in the home inspection process. The wording on that is kind of tricky, but if you have somebody as an inspector who's trying to follow you around and wants to get up on your ladder and they're not taking no for an answer, you may not be able to walk the roof. That's what it's designed for. Jumping over to InterNACHI Standards of Practice, which is a baseline, and this is what we use. It's supplementary to the seller's disclosure, but it's pretty much the same thing. We're going to inspect all those things we just described. We're going to describe the type of roof covering materials, and we're going to report as in need of correction observed indications of active roof leaks. Now, what does that mean? Obviously, the big one, the obvious one is water's coming down through the ceiling. That's an observed indication of an active roof leak. But how often is that really going to happen? In all the inspections that I've done, I've seen that happen maybe 2 or 3 times. We get lucky, we see it, or unlucky as the case may be. But there are some other things. Believe it or not, most of the roofs we see, it's not shingle failure. It's not general deterioration. It's how the thing was installed. It's flashing. It's areas where the roof meets against walls, drip edges, things like that softens. We have to rely on secondary evidence to observe indications of active roof leaks. And a lot of times, if it's not raining, it becomes a possible indication of an active roof leak, which we will report on to protect our clients and you. So there's a couple things here that are in the standards of practice that don't show up obviously in the state, but predicting the service life expectancy of a roof is not part of the home inspection. Obviously, we can't do anything underground or move insulation. That's obvious stuff. Warrant or certify the roof or perform a water test. Why don't we warrant or certify the roof? Because we're a snapshot in time. We can only tell you what we see right then and there. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And a good inspector will set the expectations and still give you a sufficient amount of detail so that your clients can make an informed decision. And hopefully, if I've done my job right, I'll be able to give you some examples of that. And I think I'm going to do that now. Let's start with a few examples of how reporting looks like.
Hold on, Vito, real quick. Do we ever use drones to inspect the roof?
No, no. And the reason being is different jurisdictions have different ideas about that. There's privacy issues. There could be some liability, although we are working on something viable that we can take to more of a luxury market where the houses are all big 3- and 4-story affairs with multiple roof pitches and things like that. But even a drone is not going to simulate what you can see when you're actually on the roof and feeling it under your feet and touching sidewalls and flashing with your hands. It's flashy, it's attractive, but it has a limited benefit, in my opinion.
And Vito, if I could just secondarily on that, it is something that we have looked at, whether we became certified to do it or worked with a professional who does have those capabilities. So if your buyer is requiring it because, we didn't get on the roof for whatever reason, but we put our ladder up there and we looked at the roof, we used binoculars and our cameras, and they just wanted that done. We do have a couple connections that can help make that happen. So don't hesitate to ask. Very similar to sometimes when it's a septic tank inspection. We're not septic tank certified. We get a lot of that up in Pasco County. So we have different partners that can help do that for our buyers. We try and coordinate at the same time, very similar to we do with our WDOs. We are not WDO certified. However, we work very closely with Regional Pest. We schedule them, we invoice for them, and we send the email. So that way later on when you or your buyer are looking, you don't have to remember who the pest control company is. You just have to remember all my reports came from Rock Solid. Let me just look at that search in my email, and I'll be able to pull any report that I need. So we try and make it as simple as possible for you and try and, again, drive that value and partnership. And once we're able to do that, we should be able to overcome almost any issue that you may have. And Vito, back to your point of not walking on the roof, sometimes weather could determine that. Even if it's a shingle roof, 1 story, if it's raining out, our inspectors probably are not going to find it safe to be up on a roof if it's wet. So it will help with possible active leaking when we're in the attic, but it won't be something where we are getting on a roof that could put anybody in danger.
Absolutely, and thank you for repeating that, because it's an important point. But it's also an important point to stress that if it's raining, I don't need to look at the roof. I just need to look in the attic, because that's where I'm going to see the leaks. There's never a better time to do a roof inspection than when it's raining. So whether or not I walk on it is really irrelevant. And a good inspector We'll convey that to the buyers, so they're most protected, and we'll get into that. So when I do a standard roof inspection, and we're going to go through this here, I walk the roof whenever possible. I am looking at the shingles. I'm looking at how well they've been holding up over time. I've already done my research before I get on site. I hopefully, if permits were taken or there is a record of that makes sense when that roof was likely installed. For instance, if I do a roof on a house that was built in 2010, I'm reasonably sure that that roof's going to be 10 years old, not having been replaced recently. When you get to 15, 20 years, it's impossible, so we look for permits. I want to know that there's no soft spots. I'm particularly paying attention to counter flashing, head wall flashing, penetrations like plumbing vents, electrical masts, etc. I want to know because where drip edges, how does it look from underneath on the eaves if they're staining? All those are indications. And when we report, it's kind of compiled like this. This is, I'll go back to that in a second. We start with how many layers. In this, it has one layer. We want to make sure it doesn't have more than that. Not only is having multiple layers bad, against the rules in some jurisdictions, but it makes roof replacement that much more expensive and reduces the lifespan of the roof. We describe the roof covering materials. In this case, it was dimensional asphalt shingles, which typically have a 30-year lifespan. And we give a little bit of extra detail in the description as a value add. Then we start checking the bonding. In this case, you can see that the bonding had kind of failed in certain places. Why is that important? Because in a strong wind, those shingles are coming right off. That's what's important about that. Other than that, though, I mean, the shingles themselves look to be in good shape. The bonding is an easy fix. Somebody can come and hand seal it. It's not that big of a deal. But I could see even in a really nice house, this one area, and this was over the front door where the hip roof kind of swung down and net over here. The sidewall here, the counter flashing wasn't attached right. They had slapped a bunch of sealant on and around it, and there was a ton of staining on the eaves underneath also. It's not too clear in this picture, but it was missing kick-out flashing. So basically, this entire roof was channeling moisture to this corner on the front of the house and then dumping it right at the foundation. And of course, that's where we found our issues. So that's what we would describe. Here's how it would look in another inspection. Here's a good example of a two-story roof that was unsafe to walk. So this was the partial roof replacement is this gray area right here, right at the top of the lower portion. It was clear that they had done some patchwork. There weren't any permits for it or anything like that. And anytime I think we got a do-it-yourselfer or a handyman trying to avoid being held accountable to modern standards, I'm going to let the client know about it. I didn't have any leaks, I think, on this one, but still, when you look at the shingles, all of that shiny stuff on that is where the shingles. It was an older roof. What did we have it? Yeah, it was about 28 years old. This was at the end of its life, and even though parts of the shingles looked okay, you could see when the light hit it. That's all asphalt. That's all the fiberglass and stuff at the end being deteriorated and shining through under the light. And we just managed to get a really good picture of it. But if you look from far away, oh yeah, that roof's great. Look at it. Yeah, it's 28 years old. It's about done. It needs to be replaced. Whether or not it's leaking, it doesn't matter. But you can see, even without walking the roof, we were able to give them a thorough inspection and show them the condition, the descriptions, what it was, where, and where the problems might be. We did that one. Let's jump to another one. No head wall flashing at all. Why is that important? No way to channel moisture around. That's going to be an indication of leak. Here's what two layers looks like. So they took roofing and just slapped it right over on another one. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. When you have wood, when you have the wood decking of the roof showing through, it's time to get someone out there. And that's how we say, you know what? It's just asphalt roll. It's not a big section. Fortunately, it's just the asphalt roll section. Just have somebody replace it. It's not that expensive. It's if you love the house, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And the rest of it was dimensional. And here's a good one. Observed indication of leak. This is a potential concern. If a flat roof is stained like that and it's holding water, you know, it could potentially lead to issues. The point is, if and when it becomes a problem, that's where it's going to be. It's not going to be anywhere else. It just, and roofers know this. Roofers, these flat roofs deserve to be slightly sloped to prevent something like this from happening. More descriptives, more descriptives. This roof, other than that one spot, was in fantastic shape. Here we go. This was a basic inspection we did, where we're only looking for really, you know, major issues, strictly adhering and not giving much extra. And you can see damage to the shingles. You can see severe general deterioration. It was just time. It was just time. This is one of those instances where the shingles themselves had been deteriorating, torn and damaged. And it's just age. It's just age. Everything gets old. And the older I get, the more sympathy I feel for it and the less it bothers me. But something we have to tell the client. And this was a 100-year-old bungalow in Tampa that was converted to a chiropractic office, and they had us come do the inspection. And you can see here's a perfect example. Somebody had come back after the fact to add some head wall flashing and didn't do it properly. They slapped a bunch of roofing tar and caulk over it, and sure enough, all the wood was stained underneath. This whole backside had been replaced, no permits or anything. It was just, and there were patchworks along the ridge caps and everything. The flat portions of the roof, you know what? They were actually not in bad shape. They had aged well, but they were almost 20 years old. So, you know, calling something out as old is not the same as calling something out as bad. And more descriptions. So it wasn't, you know, horrible, but really that's what we're doing. It starts at the ground. We're looking underneath the eaves. Is it stained? The eaves should not be stained, because that means water's getting through. The gutters, are the gutters helping it? Are they functioning properly? Are they draining water away from the house? Remember, the house, its first and foremost job is to shed water. It's not waterproof, but it should be shedding water fast enough so that it's not getting inside. Then we go into the attic and we start looking at the roof sheathing from underneath. Let's see if I can't give you a couple of good pictures. Here's a perfect example. So when you have a rock solid home inspection, your inspector knows when he's doing the underneath of the roof, we're looking for staining. Why? It's an observed indication of an active roof leak. If I see a stain and I can reach it, I'm going to do test it with the moisture meter. I'm going to give you that data. I'm also going to scan it with a thermal camera, just so you know that a stain, it might not be active. There's really no way to be 100% sure unless it's actively raining. So we always do a little extra to let you know everything as much as possible, and in some cases might even help you negotiate with a cellar. There's a stain I couldn't reach. And insulation. Insulation's really simple. There's not a whole lot to it. We're going to describe it. We're going to give you a general estimate of its average depth. We're not required to estimate R values or anything like that, although I might include that data if it's visible on typically there will be a sheet of paper somewhere in the attic by the entrance that'll be tacked on, and it'll say R30 or whatever the installers put on there. And we'll let you know if it's blown in, if it's batting with vapor barrier, whatever it is. We're going to describe it, and we're going to definitely call out areas where it might be low. And again, it's not the end of the world. It's easy to blow in some extra insulation, and we always recommend, you know, doubling insulation can halve your energy costs. That's an important value add. So believe it or not, this one went kind of quick. I would love to hear some questions if anyone's got any. Now would be an excellent time. We've got a few minutes.
Vito, we quite often get questions around, even though we are not required to provide a remaining time life of a roof surface, but we do often get questions around that. What are the guidelines that we follow when we're making recommendations as far as how long is a shingle roof typically, and tile and such?
That's an excellent question, and it's fairly standard. I mean, it depends on, and those of you who've been here week after week, you know my take on it. You talk to a roofer and he wants to replace that thing when it's 5 years old because he's going to make money. If you talk to the manufacturer, they say, oh, that roof's going to last you 100 years, you should buy ours. If you talk to the insurance company, though, in this case, the insurance companies have a better idea because they're calculating risk. And we tend to stay closer to that. So a 3-tab asphalt shingle is going to ideally last 25 years. Dimensional or architectural asphalt shingles will typically be a 30-year. Asphalt roll, modified bitumen, the flat rolled stuff, can be 15 or 20 depending on what it was, and we're not always able to tell. We just need a good inspector who can use sound judgment in the field. TPO, the rubber membrane, the older stuff, it was 10 years, and now there's documentation and insurance companies are allowing us to give it 30. So, but that's more the heavy duty stuff that you'd see on commercial buildings that I see more and more now over porches and things like that, or flat roof sections. Concrete tiles are going to be based on 50 years. Metal can be anywhere from 40 to 70. And clay tiles, 50 years, similar, but they get cracked and need regular maintenance long before they start to wear out from age. Does that answer your question?
Seems to be what we get when we're asked about those, yes.
I see a question from Jim. How do you slope a flat rolled roof? When they install, and that's a great question. So it's when they install it. I mean, it should be. It could be, the picture I showed you, it could just be the decking just a little softer right there, or just a little bit of a warp in the wood. It could be no big deal. But they are supposed to use like the equivalent of furring strips, and I forget the exact construction term they use, but it amounts to a skinny piece of wood just lifting that flat roof on about 1 inch on the high side, where you just need it a little bit so that water will slope away. It's not even enough to really notice unless you're standing right on it. It's a great question. Thank you.
We have a question. Applying the rules that inspectors follow, what is the one thing that your company will do that is not required that sets you apart from other companies?
I love that question because it makes us look good. Well, number 1 and 2, moisture meters and thermal imaging. Those are the obvious ones. So if I were to go back to that basic inspection I talked about, the strict adherence, we had stains in the attic and I just said, stains, get a roofer. In the inspection we highlighted just a few moments ago, you can see that when I saw the stain, I took my moisture meter and took a picture of it showing it was dry, and then I scanned it with a thermal camera showing it was dry. You know what? I still had to let them know that, you know, it could be possible because obviously water got through in the past. But that's one thing you're not going to get from a lot of inspectors. And if I might add, non-threatening walkthroughs. You guys know my feelings on this. Scary inspectors have skinny children. I'm going to say that again. Scary inspectors have skinny children. If I am doing a walkthrough and I'm with the buyers, guess what? Mr. Customer, I got on that roof. I walked the whole thing. I didn't have any soft spots in the decking. The shingles look good. There's flashing in place. I like the roof. It should have plenty of life left on it. There is one spot over here by, say, the electrical mast where I noticed it's dependent on a sealant that's going to dry, shrink, and crack. It's an easy fix. I'd like you to have somebody take a look at it. I noticed some moisture intrusion. How different is that from, oh my God, your roof's leaking? Because both of those can apply to the same exact situation. You have a home inspector come up, oh, your roof leaks. They're not going to hear anything else. The roof's leaking. Oh my God. What? You're crazy taking me to look at this house. You should know better, my realtor. Have a good inspector, like we train our guys, like I would do personally, like I would treat my own family.
And we'll get to a couple of the other things as we go through this process, but those standards of practice are minimums, and we do test every window, test every outlet. You know, we do other things as we go through this process that you'll see separate us from our competition. Our warranties and guarantees are there. I had mentioned earlier the call for the pipe issue. She's putting in a warranty because it was just normal wear and tear, and I have a strong feeling that she'll get a portion of that money back. Had a roof issue earlier this year that the client got a $1,500 check back from the warranty company. So it's not going to solve everything. It's not an end-all, solve-all, but it's just a nice additional value that we try and add. Vito, I see that we're running out of time here. I see another question from Ginny. Is there a minimum requirement for drainage on flat roofs?
I see the question. I think, I'm not sure what you saw, but if it had a small drain coming up through the roof, it was probably a plumbing vent and maybe not a drain. So really, what we want is gutters, and it's not a requirement. So many houses in Florida don't have gutters, but I'm always calling out a lack of gutters around the house. It's either completely guttered, partially guttered, or no guttered, and I'm going to include that information as part of the home inspection.
All right, Vito. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. We will be at the same bat time, same bat channel next week, 1 o'clock. I cannot remember. Dean, you don't happen to remember what next week is, do you?
Give me 1 second. Electrical system and appliances.
Oh, that sounds fun. I know we get a lot of questions around double tap, cloth wiring. We just talked a little bit about that last week in our 4-point and wind. So I'm sure some of that might be reiterated, but it's always good to know what's out there. So,
and the schedule is in the Facebook event that I created if anybody wants to look at it.
Okay. And so if you haven't, please do friend us on Facebook. I don't know if that's what you do to a business, but sounds good.
I think you follow it.
Okay. Check out our website and then also our YouTube channel if you missed any of these. Wonderful Vito Bianca certified home inspector led classes. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
And happy closing.